You're listening to Gone Mobile, your input and output for all things .NET MAUI and mobile.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Gone Mobile. And Alan, this probably sounds familiar, kind of repetitive. We just did this. This intro.
We just did a retry here because John has flaky internet. So
yeah, it's been.
I've already heard his bad joke of the week, but he's going to make it again anyways. So you'll all appreciate it, but this time I'm not going to be surprised.
No, but well, it's a recurring kind of theme here, but you know.
Oh, there you go. He slightly changed stuff. Good job.
Changed it a bit. So have you yeah, I was saying before that this episode is going to be a little bit of therapy for me to get out some of my angst about in-app purchases. And you've dealt with them a little bit before, right?
I have. I've done subscription stuff. I've done a couple of like direct buy stuff, but for the most part, if you have an actual credit card, it's pretty easy to do, right? You wire it up.
Yeah,
that's
but
you have to use. You need a real credit card, real purchase.
But you use the in-app purchases APIs, right? Because you have to on device.
Yeah. So the problem is when you starting to test it, because then it goes from, this is okay, to this is absolute terror. Ooh.
Yeah.
Where did this come from? And then it goes to the server. If you go to the server, it gets even worse.
Oh,
like, I'm like, how did we get here, guys?
We'll talk a little bit about the server part yet too. I've got some order to this madness.
I'm jumping ahead, but John's got.
You're jumping ahead.
He's got pain.
Yeah. So I mean, like the early days, like App Store was just you charge for your app and you're done. And then they decided, well, we can make more money if we allow you to charge inside of your app too, right? And so they introduced like consumable in-app purchases. You're like, I want to pay 99 cents for more coins so that I don't have to churn on your game.
That was almost because they want their cut more, though, right?
Yes.
Like they really do want their cut, because what would happen is you'd go out to a website and you'd have your own processor kick in there.
Yep.
And they couldn't shut it down because you didn't have another way to do it.
Right.
But now you have another way to do it.
Now they shut it down and you must use their thing, right? So they take a cut. It's like 30%, I think, both of the platforms, right? Unless you've got special deals with them.
Bigger or smaller, depending on how large your thing is.
So
clearly Fortnite was having none of it, but.
Yeah, well, there's the whole legal battle of it too, right? Where they're like, people want to be able to load in other stores and other payment methods and systems and stuff because we don't want to have to be forced to pay you our cut. And I think one of the interesting things with that is kind of like they take their cut. So, but for subscriptions, both Google and Apple in recent years, I think it's not been that old, they introduced like if you have a recurring subscriber for the subsequent subscription payments, they only take 15%.
Oh. So you keep them happy and you make more money off them.
Yeah. And which it's been big. So my app does yearly subscriptions, and it's not. I've complained about this. Like people are like, I have so much money. It's like, yeah, it's $8 a year, man. If you have a pool, you probably can manage to deal with it, right? But it's a big thing for me to now not have to pay 30% every year. Like I'm only paying 15% on those subscribers that are year after year, which is kind of nice.
Does it keep going if they cancel and come back though after a year?
Or I mean, truthfully, I've never looked that hard into it to know one way or the other. Who knows? Probably not. It's probably some clause.
Yeah. Like, they canceled and then came back. So no, we take our 30.
Yeah. And so the other interesting thing that Apple did too, right, is one, they force you to use their system if you want to do any payments in the app. But two, I don't know if they're still the same on this or not. I think maybe it changed, but originally they forced you to charge the same price if you were going to also allow purchasing the subscription outside of the store. Like you couldn't say, oh, you can buy it in the app, but if you go to our website, you can pay us 30% less because we don't have to pay the Apple tax. Like they would, if they figured that out, they're like, you can't do that.
Which is a shame.
Yeah.
But it means you have to, in order to counteract it, you have to raise your prices everywhere.
Yep.
If you're taking a loss potentially from that 30%, which you never should be taking a loss, but You know what I'm
No,
saying?
but I mean, it's you're passing it on to customers, right? Because
Yep.
so like at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I'm sorry, I have to pass it on even more in places that I otherwise wouldn't. But this is the world I live in, so you have to do it that way.
Way to
It's
go,
like
Apple.
you
Thanks,
can't
Apple.
like if you've ever used like the Kindle app and stuff, right? Some places are just like, I'm not even going to do it in the app, so that we'll just tell you like you can't buy your ebook in the app. You have to go to Amazon's website.
Which sucks. And you're barely allowed to even say that anymore, too.
Right. It's
They-
like purchases,
why? Why
Yeah.
can't you do it? Because it takes a lot of infrastructure that we don't want to set up in the app.
Yep.
The app's not good for searching. Oh, okay.
So they get their cut. Now, I'm being someone who has benefited from in-app purchases directly. I'm a little bit less harsh about them because, so for one, it's not the same everywhere in the world, but like that 30%, they take care of the taxes and stuff too, right? Like they collect the taxes for you. So like in Canada, where our HST rate is 13%, that's 13% of the 30% that I'm going to have to pay the government anyway. So like now you're really charging me 17% in a way, right?
Yeah.
And there's no like transaction fees on top of that. It's like, that's their cut. So it's a lot, but yeah, ultimately I'm not that bent out of shape about it myself. I'm sure others are. And it makes a big difference if you're a huge company, if you've got like tons of revenue coming in, obviously. For me, it's like, I didn't want to set that up myself anyway. So, okay, fine. I'll pay the tax.
The thing that I worry about it, though, is that they can up it at any time.
Yeah.
They can obviously drop it, but they can up it. And if you have no recourse, right? You have, if this is where you're making money, you have to do it.
Yeah, there's no
and
choice.
yes, you can pass it on to your customers, but then customers complain. I mean, you know how that goes.
They complain about $8 a year. They're going to complain about $9 a year too if I have to do
exactly.
that, right?
And you just say, look, this is because of Apple. And what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah.
You can't fight it, right? It's like it's not as bad as Canadian taxes when they go up here. You can protest all you want. They don't care, right?
No. And there, to be fair, there was like with that whole subscription thing where they only charge 15% now, there was like the lawsuits on both sides where Apple had to pay out, a bunch of money because they overcharged on that percentage or whatever, right? So like I got a big check when that happened from them, that money they owed, and it's like, great, I'll take it. Google was less so because of course the platform of Google, of Android, is like not where, compared to iOS, is not where the money is made, at least in my experience. It's like a third of what iOS does, always reliably. So anyway, that's the whole tax part of it, right? The company's taking their cut. I mentioned that in-app purchases were originally those like one-off consumables, like it's a one-time purchase. You had to kind of keep track of that in your app. I don't have a lot of experience with those because I have done subscriptions mainly. And for me, it was lucky that they started doing subscriptions like right around the time where I was figuring out how I was going to do this in my app. And recurring subscriptions, like auto-renewing subscriptions, right? So I use their setup and it's like, yep, you want to subscribe, $8 a year. And then the year comes up and it automatically bills them again for me. And we'll talk about like how that gets into the app and stuff. But I retain users that way. Whereas I was very close to being like, this looks hard to implement. Maybe I'll just charge like a consumable price and kind of treat it as a subscription or something like that, right? But I really think if I had done that, I wouldn't have nearly the user, retainment that I've got today, where it's just, see, on one hand, like I don't want people paying for something they're not using, but it's easy to forget $8 a year and be like, yeah, I kind of use it, right? And just let it keep going. So,
well, I mean, if it's $8 annually, right? You just it's almost like a one-time fee, anyways. If you're going to use it every summer,
right? So
Who cares?
this is I think also partially why they did it. Obviously, for them, having people forget about it is more money for them too, right? Like same idea. But at the end of the day, like I also don't think Apple wanted their app store polluted with like Pool Math 2024, Pool Math 2025, because that was going to be the model. At some point, I need to keep making money to keep building this app and making it worth my time. So either I charge you a recurring subscription or I just keep doing the whole like Microsoft Office used to do, right? Now it's Now it's evergreen. It's like you just keep paying for it and you keep getting the new stuff, which I like better as a user too.
It's easier. It's easier all around. Everything about it is easier.
Except
all parties
for
involved.
Implementing from a development perspective.
Well, again, if you're doing it
Ish.
straight, if you take an actual credit card and you bill yourself, I mean, you're going to get about 65 cents back out of that dollar that you just spent.
Yeah.
But if you spend it and test it and the actual implementation there, it's pretty easy. But I don't want to keep testing at 99 cents and getting, at 30 cents, I guess. Be going through a lot of quarters real quick. Testing cancellations, testing renewables, and then there's dates and
and that's really kind of what I'm getting at, right? Like its subscriptions they've gotten harder yet too, because it like not only when you subscribe, in the app, the code, if you're using like Apple's API, which originally was StoreKit, there's StoreKit 2 now. StoreKit 1 is deprecated. StoreKit 2 is Swift UI or Swift only. And so that's a challenge for Maui developers. So got to kind of think about that a bit going forward. But the code there to write against those APIs is not the worst, but it's not great. Like you still have to kind of, okay, I'm asking the user first. I have to query the products, right? I have to get a list of the products from Apple because I have to make sure I show the current prices and stuff that I've set up properly. I have to show the right price for the right locale. There's guidelines on like how you have to explain what the charge is for, that it's recurring, how to cancel it. Like there's all these stipulations. I went through multiple like App Store rejections before I landed on like the right text they wanted to see, right? I'm like, just make this clear to me. The wording you have is vague of what you want me to do. And finally I got there where they were happy with it. But you have to do all those things. And then finally, when the user's like, okay, I want to subscribe, you have to decide, well, do I try and restore first? Like maybe they had a previous one. If I just subscribe, it's kind of going to figure it out anyway. And then I go do the whole subscription thing, and it might come back in a various, different states of like, couldn't connect to the billing server kind of thing, right? Like Apple's API. Couldn't, the payment failed for some other reason. The payment is pending. Like maybe it's in a weird state where they're trying to process it, but it didn't fully go through. And it's in like this, and you might not always know that initially either, right? It might come back as like, yep, it worked. And then like on the back end, they're going to tell you, well, it's in this pending state and it might still fail, but we'll let you know either way. So it's just, it's not easy to implement. And then on Apple, they kind of do the thing where it's like, you can get like called back at any point in time in the app. Like even if you're in the background, they might be like, hey, the subscription updated, here's the info. And so you kind of have to deal with that. And then it's not clear, like that code running in the background. Is it, we've talked about backgrounding. Is it beholden to some of those same things or not? Like, I don't know.
I've never checked that, to be honest. Because that also goes to the server if you're doing the server implementations of that.
That's the other part, right? So you get all this information back. So now I've got presumably this like transaction receipt. Okay, the user, it succeeded. Great. What do I do with that? Well, one, I probably want to validate it to make sure that it's legit.
Yep.
I don't do that in my app right now.
Oh, because everybody go get free pool math.
Go get free pool math. There's a few different ways you could game my payment system in terms of making it exploiting things for free. But I don't know how big of a I don't think there's a lot of abuse of it. There might be. I don't know. I don't care. It's not worth my time. But you should really go validate it, right? And then what do you do if like you have, network failure trying to do that, right? Like, well, I don't know, I guess I'll pretend it's fine for now and check again later.
That's why you needed a job, John.
The shiny job?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That's specifically for those scenarios, but anyhow.
I know. But it's just like all these things start piling up and it's like, it's such a headache to do all of this. And that's just to implement it, right? And then like Apple, you can't query the server for like what's the state of things without potentially prompting the user to like sign in. You can't do it. There's no way. Like you can ask for purchases, and you'll get some information back on those, but you can't you can't like go see if like there's a renewal pending or something. Like it's kind of weird. And then the purchase data you get back, like I think they're better now. They might have added more information around like expiry dates and stuff for subscriptions. But originally there was no like you the way I did it originally was like I know the transaction date and I know that this transaction is good for 1 year, so I got to go figure that window out for myself and store that. So then you got your receipt and you probably want to put it on your server because they have server to server kind of notifications, right? So what I didn't do at first was put the receipts on my server, and I started looking at like, oh, how do I do these? Apple announced these backend, server notifications. Great. Oh, there's no way I can tie the user together with the purchase notification because I didn't store all of the transactions on my own server, like the receipts, right? So like I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do backend server notifications yet, but I'm going to start storing that information so that in the future I could plausibly say I'll have the receipts there, and I can go back and say, okay, here's the receipt, that changed. Here's the token or the transaction ID or whatever. Now I can go look through my database and see if I find the matching one, and this is the user it's for. Therefore, I know it's this user. I can update their stuff. But then I still have to get it to my app. I have to figure out like, well, how do I, do I just every time the app launches, go check my server and see what the status is? Probably, right? Yeah.
It's pretty easy to do. Yeah.
It's pretty easy to do. But like, again, I want to make my app. I want to spend the time coding like the features of my app, not coding around payment implementation details.
Well, you can just, you can put the role right in the JWT. You have to renew that anyways, right?
Sure.
That's not as bad as you think.
No. Well, but Google is worse, right? Did you ever try to do the Google backend stuff?
Oh no, yeah.
So let me start with what's that?
Shocking. Google is worse.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, their library is kind of better and worse. Both.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. It looks a little bit better when you start working with it.
Right.
I don't want to say it behaves better, it behaves differently, but it certainly looks like a cleaner API when you start using it. But I digress. I will leave this one to you.
It is a bit cleaner. But the problem, so Google, like the weird thing always was, and I think it maybe still is, like they had these ADL files, right? That you had to like, it was like this, it was almost like a, what was the SOAP stuff? AIDL.
Okay.
Which was like a definition or like a contract definition. It's almost like, a GPRC, whatever the thing is for those, right?
Okay.
Or like SOAP or something.
You were throwing out an acronym. I was like,
yeah, what? Yeah. It's this weird file. And we did in Xamarin, and I think still in Maui, had like a build or a compile type or whatever that like you could say, oh, it's an ADL file, and it would generate some C# code based on that file. And that's what you'd use. So that was kind of weird and annoying, but fine. But then Google's like, they keep updating their own library too, right? So like there was a number of years where it was like, fine, just everything's good, okay. And then they're like, oh, we have version 5 of the library. Oh, and by the way, you have to update to this by this date, otherwise your app's going to stop working. Okay. Oh, and now we have version 6 next year. Oh, and you got to update to this by this date or your app's going to stop working. Okay.
Or you want to use this thing, but it's in beta. So
right.
It turns out it's been in beta for a long time, but keep using it.
Keep using it. And now there's V7 coming up. And I've heard rumblings that in this version, or maybe it's the next version coming, they're changing how you can query like existing purchases or something too. And like you won't get as much information back. It's almost like they're like, yeah, this is too hard for us to provide. So you're gonna have to rely more on your server backend stuff for figuring this out. So they're taking functionality away. And this is all like layers on layers of trying to do stuff in .NET too, right? Like that all kind of adds another aspect of it. We'll talk about like how you get at that today, because there are ways. But back in the day when I went to Google I/O conferences, they had started shipping integrations for Unity, which is also C#, and they have one for billing stuff because they want Unity games to make money too, right?
And just to throw this out there, John was an Android fanboy for the longest time,
Oh,
but he
yeah.
worked on the Android team.
Yep.
He has since converted. So good for you, John.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's time in everyone's life for making better choices. So
Yeah, there
I
you
got
go.
there. Yeah.
You're like a recovering alcoholic, except
That's
recovering
right. Yeah.
from good.
I used to be an Android fan, but I learned, I grew. Yeah. So they had like Unity stuff, and it was kind of funny because I remember talking to some of the people like at Google there, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we should totally figure out how to make it work for Xamarin because it's all C#." And all these kind of promises of making that easier that never happened. But yeah, the implementation is not that dissimilar, and it's similar enough that we'll talk about the plugins and packages and stuff. But there's plugin in-app billing by James Montemagno that I've used in my app for years, and it's served me well.
I think that's the only one that's out there, isn't it? There's not really another.
So. No. So then, you start coding all this together, and we haven't even done the back end yet because, like I said, I started to, and I'm like, oh, I need this transaction data in my database before I can even do that. So give it a year. But then there's testing. So you mentioned, obviously, using like a credit card and stuff. So testing is where, this really falls down. For iOS, you can test a variety of ways. You usually, well, first of all, like your development, like sandbox versus ad hoc or app store provisioning kind of matters too.
Yeah, because it's an entitlement, right?
Yeah. So you kind of got to know what you're building against provisioning profile wise. Now, I feel like I've kind of simplified this because I do stuff on TestFlight almost exclusively now. So it's always like ad hoc or whatever entitlement, they end up using there. And one of the good and bad things, I guess, of that is that your TestFlight users basically get free subscriptions, right? Because they can use their own account. They'll test with it. It won't actually charge them. And that's one of the ways to test. So you could also test with creating like an App Store Connect user account, which is like a fake iTunes user. But even like the whole process of when you go to like buy a subscription or an in-app purchase, you get like a weird janky dialogue that you can log in with, right? If you do it this way, and it's got like the dialogue with like the 2 text fields on it, and you've got to log in with like the App Connect, App Store Connect account, and then it starts working and testing, but it's like fake testing. And I don't know. Did you ever do any of that with your testing?
I think ultimately we did. Thankfully, that at that point it was like, okay, my goal was to just get it working end to end with minimal stuff. And once I collected the IDs from it, we just shipped them through. So I didn't really need to. I literally tested, and when I saw what was involved in testing with just raw purchases, and then I unit tested my way to victory, John. From there forward.
Yeah, but there's always like, especially when I do app updates, I have like this recurring nightmare of screwing up that code. And then like, I just start losing sales, right? Like it takes me a week to turn it around. And by that point, I've lost thousands of dollars in sales. Like it's not for the faint of heart. So like testing is important, and testing beyond just knowing that like my app does the right things in my own backend. It's more, is my app working properly with the actual APIs? That's the scary part. And so, the process to do that is weird. And so TestFlight users, and the same works for Play Store, like on Android, if you have like testers in those groups, they'll get to test subscriptions for free. But the weird part about it that I found more recently is like the duration of those things is changed when it's testing. So a year subscription might actually have like an interval of like a minute or something like that.
Nice.
So, when I first did this, like my granularity of how much I tracked for like subscription length was like to the day. Well, suddenly we're testing in hours or in minutes now. And I'm just like, if I do it like this, it's like you subscribe and then right away it thinks you're not subscribed because it's my resolution of time is like just by the day. So I had to like add in a thing that by default everyone in TestFlight is like a paid subscriber, and then there's a switch that I can like at least go in that shows up when it's on test flight that just lets me enable, testing those things so that I can do it. But man, I get the idea of making the interval short because you want to test like renewals and stuff, but couldn't they do that in like the UI that pops up when you subscribe or something,
I feel like there's a lot of things they could have done differently. It's just like, it's almost like JavaScript, right? They just keep adding crap to it and they're
Yeah.
like, well, we can't really change the foundation anymore. This is the way it is.
It's all kind
deal with
of
it.
an afterthought. It's like,
Yeah.
we'll just add this on. It'll be fine. You can
Just-
test like this.
But actually the best one, MCell, Microsoft Authentication. Domain logins. I mean, nobody actually likes MCell. There's just, you don't really have a choice for bang for a buck. So, but they can't change anything. So I think that's the case a lot of these payment processors fall into. It's like, this is the way, we can't change it because of some, I don't know, some policy. I bet you PII gets involved with this. Like, you get all the security experts involved here, and then they're like, no, you can't do that. This is not the way. And so now you just have to, the security expert says this needs to change and you need to adapt.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're on version 7. You're like, what is this? Why am I getting less? You're not supposed to give me less. You're supposed to give me more.
I know. You're supposed to make it easier. And to try and do, that stuff on device more, because like now that stuff is getting harder to use their APIs with, and probably for the reasons you said. So now you've got to start dealing with all the back end stuff, right? And we talked a little bit about it.
That could be so much easier. Like, if they just handled the transaction, like it doesn't even go on your app. I guess they have to, because not everybody has a back end.
Sure.
Which is weird nowadays,
but,
right?
But
there are
the
apps
point is that
have...
they're making it that you kind of have to at this point. So like, I don't know. Maybe just make that assumption now.
But I don't know. We've even had user feedback recently from somebody that said, like, I don't have a back end. I have like a local database and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that works. Absolutely. If you don't need a back end, you don't need to, like, a game doesn't necessarily need a back end, right?
Sure. But if you're doing subscription stuff, like, I guess that's just going to be a cost of doing business for you now.
I guess.
But
it can be a big cost, unfortunately.
Yeah. So
I mean, I guess you could store it in SQLite and hope that you don't have threading issues. I don't know.
Oof, yeah. So that's where things are going, and we all know, we've talked on past episodes about how well Apple does at web APIs.
They do everything so weird. They're like, we followed standards, and it's like, what standards?
Yeah.
Nothing open API you put against it generates properly. I think we tried that Kyoto stuff. No, Andrew, Kyoto's weird anyways. But
so this one, like, I mean, it's weird as well. And like the way that like stuff is encoded and signed, like, I get it. You got to have some security in there, but at the same time, like, why are you making this so hard?
You're calling me.
It's a server to server thing. Yeah.
No, but you're calling me. I've got HTTPS. You can say if the certificate's invalid, don't send.
Right.
I mean, hell, they could fine, hash it then, and we'll unhash it. We should have.
Well, they're doing something like that, which is like they encode the actual data, and then you've got your key that you need to decode it with, and
but it's on a field by field basis for some of it, and you're like, what? Just the whole message, man. What is this?
I know.
What are we in the 16th century?
Well, I think it might be more like that now. So this is the other problem. Like, they came out with their whole server to server thing, or Apple Store server notifications, I think is the actual name.
No, that's the new
ass in the title, but because it's the acronym. And so like their version 1 they came out with, and it sucked, and I looked at it, and they're like, oh wait, we're gonna fix stuff, we got V2 coming out, and like a year later they're like, yep, we changed it all again. And you're just like, come on guys, like, just can you think about it before you do it in the first place, and do it better?
The ass in that class there, app.
Yeah. So they've been bad at this, and then at least theirs is just like a webhook, right? Like they're calling your endpoint, even though it's crappy data in that you have to deal with. Google does. Have you ever dealt with pub sub stuff?
Yeah, quite a bit. claim to fame for me.
Ugh, okay, gross. Sorry about your misfortune.
But webhooks is still pub sub
Oh yeah,
in
yeah,
a
yeah.
way.
Okay.
It's just a little bit
Yes.
more set up. But
Well,
yes, I
so
know where you're going with this. So
Google has their real-time developer notifications because you got to know, you got to have a socket open and get this stuff through as fast as you can to your server. So you actually have to connect with their whole pub sub thing, and they have there's a .NET client they have for it. It works. That's what I can say for it. But it's like, it's another thing, right? It's another different thing. And then like, okay, how do I set that up on my server? Because now my server has to have like a different, open WebSocket with their custom library.
it's not a web service. It's not a website anymore.
No, exactly.
Mhm.
So that's what you have to do. And then the kicker to this is like, okay, fine, I'm going to do this. You go to set it up. The number of like developer consoles and different areas you have to go within Google's properties to set this all up, it's like layers deep. You're in the Play Store console, and then you get out to the Firebase console, and then that takes you out to the Google whatever
configuration or account screens. Yeah, it's been like that for years. They're like, I don't know what they're smoking, man. But like, you got to get that in the same portal, because when you got to discover that stuff, you're like, I don't know where we're at.
And you got to create all these things and different tokens and give, access to whatever roles for a different token to.
Oh, you have to add that API to your profile too, because apparently it's not just there.
Yep.
Why can't, why do I have to go add it, then configure it? Why can't I just configure it and turn it on?
Yeah. So by the time you figure out how to even set that up, you've spent way too much time. And then, okay, fine, I start implementing it. I start doing it based on the spec. And like, same with Apple, their docs show you the objects and the format of things, and maybe give you one example of like a payload looks like. But in practice, it's not that easy. Like, stuff doesn't look the same as their docs say it does when it comes in. And you've got to figure out all the little weird discrepancies. And then once you do that, the sheer number of cases they throw at you to handle is just mind-boggling. Like status of transactions, right? So you've got, like I said before, like maybe the payment is pending with the other payment processor that Apple's talking to on your behalf, right? And so it gets into this weird like pending state where you're kind of supposed to still grant them access, but know that maybe it's going to go back. There's cancellations, there's refunds, there's expiry dates, there's didn't even get into the whole, like, do you want to do a trial period for your subscription? Okay, that's a different state that it comes in as. Do you want to have different promotions for upgrades? Are you going to try and upsell someone to a higher tier, but then have to figure out, when does that change? When is that active? Are there implications in that transition that you need to account for in your app in terms of like history? So like, there's all these different scenarios.
It's crazy. It's crazy what they do there.
It's just, there's too much. And so I started implementing these things on my back end, and I'm just, at some point I said, you know what? I'm one developer. I can spend a month doing this and testing it and figuring it out. But that's a month that I'm not providing value to the people who pay for my app.
I always wondered too why they don't just have, like, let me run a timer against an API and I'll pull the transactions, both Apple and Google.
Yeah.
And I'll pull the transactions at that point. I'm going to trust that you've enabled it. So what you gave me back is, it's all good. They can just give me an accept or reject.
Yeah.
Right. Just at the app. That's it. Nothing more.
Mm-hmm.
I gave you a product. You told me if it was accepted or rejected. And then I mark that in the app. And then the app can check later. Server, did you hear? Is this good? And the server can run daily. It can wake up, process all those transactions and go, yep. No, this isn't good. This is not good. And then ship it back.
Well,
right? I don't understand why they had to go with two vastly different techniques on both ends.
Yeah.
And they all suck.
Yeah.
Like, they all suck.
And they all have like, most, but not all of the information that you would want them to have too, right? Like, you don't have a cohesive picture anywhere in one place that you'd like. So, and then the webhook stuff, like, okay, yeah, well, what if my server's down for a day? Well, they're like, oh, well, you try, some maybe exponential back off, but after we try 5 times, we give up. Well, okay, then I just don't know about that. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you have an Azure outage. You
Exactly.
are toast.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
one of the latest one in mid US, that was several hours. So
yeah. So like that can be a problem. That's not a good place to be. So yeah, it's and then, to scale this up too, right? Like we're just talking Android and Apple. Well, in theory, there's other places.
What other places, John?
Well, there's the Amazon App Store, which, Pool Math, I think, is technically still on. I need to update it there, probably. It runs on those devices. They have their own payment stuff, which is kind of based on one of the older Google APIs. So it's like, it's not that crazy to try and figure out, but it's another place. It's another implementation, right?
Fragmentation.
And I don't think they had server to server stuff. So like you're dealing with it locally for them anyway. So you kind of still have to figure that out. And yeah, it's a lot of work. And I really wish, that they could make it just as easy as, like you said, deal with all the stuff on the back end for me. I don't care about any of that. I just want to tell you, here's the thing, the resource that my user needs to have, by the identifier to have access to this part of my app. Do they have access to it? Tell me, please. Right? Yes or no? Like from the app perspective, all I want to do in my code is say, should I give the user access to this resource? Can you please just figure that out for me? Right? But
you're asking for too much.
I know. Well, so I started, looking at this because with all of the changes to, and this is going to be a longer plugin package and product section this week, because I want to talk a little bit about what's out there. And there's probably other services. I there's the one that I know of that I'm very impressed with so far that I think I'm going to switch over to, and it's called RevenueCat. And I'm not getting paid by them to say this, but maybe I can work something out. We'll see. Have you ever heard of them?
I've heard of them. Unfortunately,
besides from me,
I had heard of them before. Now, mind you, everything that you usually recommend, if I've done some sort of search on it after that, all of my ads revolve around it. So I have a lot of RevenueCat ads.
Yeah.
And wood paneling PC boxes in my search history.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
Has it worked? Have you bought one yet?
I am not buying a wood paneled PC cover.
Those poor
I'm buying a new
advertisers.
PC, but not. I don't want wood paneling.
Think of all the money they've wasted on you now.
How come you haven't put wood paneling on your walls then?
I've actually been looking at doing that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, geez.
This is not scripted either. That's really funny. I'll have to show you after. Yeah.
Oh boy. I'm not searching that one. So you're going to have to show pictures and we're going to hope that the AI isn't listening.
No, it's always listening.
Mrs. A is listening right now going, I'm getting wood paneling for your walls ready to go.
Yeah.
Anyhow, yes, I have heard of RevenueCat.
So they have an interesting setup. Like, so the premise is we take care of those things for you. And they basically try to, provide you with what I just asked for, which is I just want to know if I should let the user access this thing. And I think they call them entitlements, which fine. I don't care what you name them. And that's like, so they're a client library and a backend. So they deal with all of the parts, right? They deal with like you not having to talk to StoreKit, or importantly now, not having to talk to StoreKit 2 when it becomes the only thing you can use, which will be a ways away, but it's going to get there. And same with the Google side, right? Because like Google's moving to billing version 7, and that's going to be like 2026 is when you have to use it by, which it's not crazy. Like I get it, you got to move people forward, but I don't want to have to keep spending time thinking about.
You wish that was nicely abstracted away, or somebody dealt with it, right?
Right. And to be fair, so James's plugin does deal with it, which is great, and it's for the most part. I mean, there's some leaky
for what he can.
Yeah.
Without having a server that he can control as well.
Yeah, like
Right.
it's not meant to be a RevenueCat situation where it deals with the back end stuff. So it deals with the client side, and it I think it does a pretty good job about that. It's been working well for me. Thanks, James. But he's going to have to keep updating as Google does, as Android does, or Apple does, and like an Apple one, like I said, is going to be a bit of a pain because it's Swift, and so I'll have to do some of those slim bindings, right? Like that's one way to do it.
Did you do slim binding? Are you going to do slim bindings for?
I haven't decided.
I think I just heard your next open source project, John.
No, well, I mean, probably not. Maybe, I don't know. So I started looking at like, okay, well, RevenueCat, so it's native libraries, obviously. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to use them in my Maui app, which is another level of difficulty. Somebody has bindings out there for them already. So I was like, oh, okay, why don't I just use these? They're not on the very latest version, which is okay because so RevenueCat, and maybe already by this point, I haven't looked in a few weeks, they might have released it as stable. They have an upcoming version which I think uses StoreKit 2, and I think updates to Play Billing 7, because they're dealing with all these changes for you, right? That's the main point, like you said, abstracting over those things.
Yep.
So the person who had the binding going, I should figure out the name because they do a bunch of them, and it'd be nice to recognize them if they happen to listen to this. I'll figure that out yet. We'll give them a
I was just going looking for the link while you're
this is the cap so it's like the Tonestro. You've probably seen things by this name. Yes. I don't know the person, but I've seen a bunch of different bindings and work from them.
All right.
Look at that, they updated to 7 already. See this? If you're listening, please reach out to me. I would like to, I don't know, say thank you at the very least. Maybe I'll buy you a beverage of your choice. Yeah, so they've already got the update. So I'm like, I'm just going to use these because somebody else is doing it. But if I had to, I could do the slim binding approach and go that way. So these ones, there's still some work to implement this, but it's pretty much like, initialize some things, then go ask, do I have access to this entitlement, and listen for events when it comes back and that answer changes for you, right? So pretty dead simple. But I think like the bigger thing that I like about them is they deal with the whole backend stuff, and the way that they have dealt with, like, I've already got it all set up in my account. All the different tokens and keys and stuff are set up, and like they the way that you do it, they test it for you. Like you can say like, oh, did the pub sub thing work? Like send the test notification from Google side, and they'll show you like, oh yeah, we got it. It's good. We're working. Right. And they helped kind of even set some of that up. Like you give them some of the keys and like they guide you through it, but there was another step where you have to like create the pub subscription or something. Like, yeah, we'll do that for you. So I was really impressed with like how easy it was to set up, considering how hard it is. Like they made it as easy as they could, I guess. Right. So,
well, and that's why I say like their libraries, right? It's the reason why James has to keep updating or doing all the stuff is because without the server portion, it's really hard to write an opinionated version of this.
Yes.
So, and RevenueCat has control of the server schematic
business,
that
right?
they can, So they still have the ability to deal with the payment processor nicely on the front end, while also making it very clean and easy. Like, dude, the user wants to order this plan.
Yeah,
that's it. Just
do
it. Don't bug me anymore. Just do it.
Yeah, and
don't even
tell me when they have.
You can tell me return true or false for all I care.
Yes.
And then it'll deal with the server, and then your server goes, yeah, this user, this, all that stuff is nicely dealt with. It's the way it should be.
And so there's a few more other challenges that I've had to deal with the whole payment stuff. Like one thing is refunds and stuff. Like so Google, you can go and initiate refunds for users. I don't know if you ever did that or knew you could even. I actually didn't know for a while, and we would tell people like, I can't do anything about this because like with Apple, you can't. I can't go refund your subscription for you. I'm sorry. I can't. There's no way for me to do it.
They don't either. They're like, too bad.
Yeah. Well, what's funny though is they do. They will.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Now they didn't used to.
No, but like, well, there'll be like a column of like, oh, there's, you had these many sales and you had this many refunds, and you're like,
Oh, that's true. I did know
yeah.
they have it, but it didn't help me years ago.
No, I
had-
think the bar is high. Like you pretty much have to say the right, probably like, oh, I'm gonna do a chargeback or whatever, right?
Well, I had my son process a one-time payment through Apple TV before they had like the lock on it, and
What's the damage?
it was about $75 Canadian.
Oh, okay. That's not so.
I mean, I was like, no, when he did it,
yeah.
he cried because he was like, oh man, I'm sorry. Because they hit you with ads, right? All these stupid games on. And I was like, it's all right, buddy. And I just kind of went and cried in a corner. I was like, oh my God.
I'm going to try and get this back.
And Apple's like, no,
Yeah.
refund. No, so we got your
What's
money.
that
You get
word?
lost.
Yeah.
I mean, it's processed. It's not refunded.
Yeah.
You just won't process it again next year, right? You better go cancel it.
Right. Yeah. And they've gotten better about like notifying you as a user if there's like your renewals coming up, right?
Yes,
And stuff
they
like
do.
that. And you have to, in your app, I think one of the stipulations now is you have to provide a place to like link out to the App Store place where you would manage that subscription too. So that's newer.
That I haven't seen.
Yeah, there's all, like I said, there's all these rules, and each platform's a little bit different of how they enforce them and stuff. So, but that's kind of where that part is at. But the RevenueCat thing, I mean, it we talked about like Google's and Apple's cut, so they have an interesting approach to their setup too.
Yeah, because you don't want to be like, hey, we'll take another 20 or 30%.
Well, yeah, they can't do that.
Yeah, they can't.
But like
nobody.
they could, but they could also be like, yeah, we'll charge you $100 a month for this, right? Like,
Yep.
and probably that would be worth it to me still too. I'm sure it would actually work out cheaper in the end for me, but they do a 1% because all the transactions flow to them at some point, right?
Yep.
So they know what sales are happening, so they can track it, and so they charge you. Although their model is like the first however much a month, it's fine on them. And every month, as soon as you go over that amount, then they start charging you a percentage, 1% of that revenue. And I think I have to look. I think it's net. Like I think it's after Apple's cut, but I'm not sure. I have to double check. Not that it really matters. Like a percent. It depends on what you're doing against volume wise, right? For me, I think of it as like, okay, 1%. How many? How much is that a year of what I make from it? Is that worth my time not spent dealing with all this crap? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it is. Very much so. So
you
good.
haven't switched to this. This is something
I haven't yet.
Actively working on getting ready for.
It's something I'm working on. So there's a few other parts to figuring this out. So one, with my setup, I store the expiry date in your account on my database. So I don't I don't store it like local on the device or anything. Like I keep it in the database.
Okay.
And part of the reason for that is sometimes I want to give people a subscription for free. Right?
Yeah.
I could go generate like redemption codes and do it that way. In some cases that would be better. And I'll tell you why in a second. But that's a lot of work to go like generate a bunch of redemption codes. And then like most of the people that I would want to give them to, like they're not going to figure out how to use them even.
Yeah,
right?
well,
Like
then
if
you
I
got to
got
go find a screen.
friend,
You got to code a screen for it. You got to code an endpoint for it. You got to code database.
Right? Yeah.
Right? All that stuff.
Yeah. So I stored in just the user record. So, another secret if you're trying to game the pool math payment system, one of the loopholes, since it's on the account, you could in theory sign in from whatever account, restore your purchase, log out, sign in with a different account, restore, right? Yeah, like you could like set up a bunch of accounts to have free transactions.
Free pools.
Yeah. Which I could probably easily crack down on now that I store receipt data, because I could kind of see like, why do you have a subscription but there's no transactions in your account?
Why is Disney Plus against this IP address and then another IP address 100 kilometers away from you?
Right. So I gave you all that idea, but don't try it because I'm coming for you. I'm going to crack down on it.
He's going to find it. John wants his $8, or actually, sorry, his $6.
$7.99 minus Yeah, minus
minus
30%, then
30%.
15.
So $5.
Yeah.
You get $5 or something.
Yeah. So storing that information, like one of the other things that this I don't want this to sound like an ad for RevenueCat, but like I'm really excited for it, so it kind of is. But they have like a similar thing where they're like, you can grant entitlement to somebody in their portal, right? So that it all meshes with their system when I use their API to say like, is this user subscribed?
Oh,
Right?
okay,
I can
that's
manually
nice.
override it.
Okay.
But then the same problem they have that I have today, which is like when we do that. So sometimes for users, like if they run into issues or whatever, we're like, hey, like that sucked. Have another year for free from us, right? Like, be happy, right?
There
They
you
may
go.
have paid for it already, but like, hey, if we spent a week going back and forth because you had some weird problem, like I'm just gonna throw you a bone and give you another year of subscription for free. But you got to go cancel that because like this is on our system, right? Like
Yep.
Apple doesn't know I gave you another year, so they're going to keep billing you. And the same applies with these guys too. And they call it out too. They're like, yeah, if you do this, like just be aware that this doesn't change. You know, we can't change someone's subscription on them, so that you got to tell them to cancel it. So, but it's kind of cool. And then the historic part of it, which is also neat, but although a little head scratchy, this is if I'm gonna bash them at all for anything, it'd be here. I want to import all my historic data too, right? I want them to know, because if I switch over, like I need them to know my users have a subscription. So they'll actually let you. They have an API that I can go send all the transaction receipts I've accumulated up to them, and they'll process them all just like they would if they came from Apple. And then they figure out the information that way. But there's like, I think they had something in their docs. They're like, if you have a lot of these, like reach out to us. We might be able to work with you on some bulk import thing. And so I did. And they're like, yeah. Because I think I'm like, I have probably, what did I think? Like maybe 80 or 100,000 transactions over the years. Like I don't need to import them all because like most of them are old and done anyway. Like every renewal, you get a new transaction from Apple and Google. And actually that makes things difficult too, right? Because like the other weird thing with Apple is there's almost, I forget how it goes, but it's almost like you've got like chained transactions, like the renewal is linked against the first one, which makes sense. But there is weirdness in some of how they do some of that in terms of like the data that's stored with each of them. So it just kind of another note, like it muddies how you deal with the results that you get back if you ask for like, give me all the transactions for this person, right? To try and check, because like some of them might be not exactly how you expect them to be, I guess is kind of the easiest way to say it.
So what did they tell you about the fact that you can't?
Wow. So they're like, you can,
which I can't kind of get why they can't let you, but
yeah, no. So they're like, yeah, we would be happy to do, you know, a bulk service with you if you like sign up for like our enterprise, you know, package, right? I'm like it's only like 1,000 a month. I'm like, no, I'm good, thanks. That's not going to be what I do. But they're like, but you can do it yourself by, you know, going through and posting them to our API. But just know that, you know, there's like rate limits and stuff. So don't blast us with, you know, 70,000 transactions all at once. So I think they're like, you should be safe, like doing like 1 per second. I'm like, okay,
well, it's going to take a while. But
yeah, so that's. But then they're like, oh, and they, to their credit, they replied back again after. They're like, oh, wait a second, I didn't mention like that's like per platform. So like you could do Apple and Google simultaneously 1 per second, right? I'm like, well, that gives me a little bit more, you know, threading.
A little bit. Well, I guess actually a lot because most of your users are probably Apple, right?
Yeah,
probably most. Yeah.
Like 1/3 and 2/3 or something, right? So it'll help. So that's my next task, because I have to write like the bulk importer that like pulls from my own database and does something like, you know, give me all the ones since this state, just slowly start feeding them in. You know, 2 days later it'll be done.
Will that properly link with Apple from that point forward too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, because
that's the nice thing, is that once you do all that, it's kind of all there, right? So it's a little bit easier of a way to do it. But again, like all of this to say, like, why couldn't they just do this out of the box for us? Why all these hoops to jump through? Like, just help me.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think Apple, if they did a webhook and said, This is the transaction ID or some identifier that you've passed to them. And the webhook is they just give you that ID.
Yeah.
And then your server has to sign and request a message or something back. And everything is just pull.
Yep.
Right. So you can just pull all the past transactions. You've got a JWT with them. So
just give me like
let me pull
since
data
date even, right? Like just here's where I've processed up to. Give me anything new and do it in batches, and I'll keep asking you for it, right? And if I end up with a duplicate, like I know how to do that on my system. I know there's a unique ID for every transaction. Like just let me.
I don't know why they did it. I don't know why they do it this way. Why they always the same something new.
It's not just like push notifications. Like we talked about that way back when their first kind of format of that, right? It was just the dumbest API you've ever made. Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, we'll give you 1,000 bytes. Figure it out.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, we won't tell you when one failed. You just kind of have to figure that out.
Well, they
yourself.
did. They came up with that server later, but you had to. Funny enough, what we're saying, you had to query that one.
Yeah.
Right. You just did this go through? Did this go through? Oh, it did. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But not the ones after that. So I hope you remember which ones you sent after the one that failed, because you got to send them again.
Yeah. I wonder who thinks these things up and why.
I mean,
if you're an Apple or Google engineer on any of those teams, push payments, send us a message. I would love to hear
tell
why.
Us why. Tell us why you did the things you did.
What kind of expensive drugs were you on when you made these things? Because I want some. And if they weren't expensive, that's a bonus too. But I also like life. So,
hey, might not have been.
I'd like to know what the thought process was. Is it like an MSAL where you're like, it's so big and so many systems use it that you cannot turn the ship anymore?
Or was it like, these are kind of tertiary things, so like an intern worked on it?
Yeah. Like, how cool can I make this if it pushes data?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about the outcomes of that. But I'm pushing data, man. It's real time. Like this is state of the art. Yeah.
Question
mark? I don't know. It just, there's things in some of the stuff that they implement where I was like, did you really truly think about this?
No, I don't. The only thing I can really think about is, for the initial push notification thing, they're like, we need to make this so it can scale huge, right? And like, what's the best way we can do that? And maybe they tried to like over engineer it so that it could do that.
And a persistent connection is going to make that fast?
Well, TLS handshakes, if you're doing it on large enough scale, fine.
I guess.
Yeah. It was more the like, okay, like tell me if it's sent or not. But so the point I was going to say too is that plus maybe the way that, the other parts of their infrastructure are architected, right? Like I could see for push if they're like, yeah, we send it off to this other queue and it's going to take like a second before we know if it worked or not. So how do we design this so that we're not waiting a second for every message, right? Like, but even that, like I can think of some reasonable ways.
It's not as, I'm not.
I'm trying real hard to defend them. All right.
Yeah, I'm not coming up with a lot of things that don't say it's weird. What has been built, and there's no coherent like similarities between the two either. At least from the back end, in the front end.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, this could have been so much easier.
But here
I think too, it's a lot easier to explain the Apple tax at that point too, when it's easier to stay, with the going trends. And if I don't have to worry about PII in the app, I mean, it's not like we care about, we don't get the credit card anyways, but we don't care. No. I don't care about any of it. I just want to know, you said you wanted this plan and this is your user ID that I shipped with it, so that when it comes to the other end, I can say, yeah, you've got this, you just paid for this plan. This was the user ID that you passed through. And here's the date that it's good till. That's it. That's all I want to know.
And then from there on, just like, let me find a way to ask you if it's still good or not, right?
Yeah.
Easy.
So we must be missing something, or we're low grade engineers, maybe.
Maybe. But certainly like RevenueCat figured it out, right? The other thing, like as I ventured into web, I was like, I have to figure out how to do that side of it too, because I want users to be able to subscribe from the web version.
Does RevenueCat do that?
So like
do they have web?
They do.
No, so but they're their own processor and every. Oh no, because
they use Stripe, which is fine because that's what I was going to use anyway. So
okay, well there you go.
But it all like integrates with their entitlements and stuff too, right? So I can just be like, okay, I'm using Stripe, and I it was easy enough to set up, and
look at you go.
Yeah, same thing. It's like everything just can flow through that. I think they also do Amazon as well, so they don't. I don't think they do the Windows in-app subscription stuff, but fine.
But why not?
Well, yeah. I mean, I had my app working with that API previously, but I've gutted it since. I'm just going to use the web app for desktop.
The four Windows developers that I know are going to be coming out with pitchforks.
I know. Yeah. But I was kind of impressed that if they did Amazon too, that was kind of neat. Because, I mean,
it's kind of telling when you think about it. They did not do Windows, but they did Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's more games that you can have kids, tapping ads on Fire devices, right?
I guess technically with games like Xbox and PlayStation would be the gatekeepers in that.
Mm-hmm. But that's a different world too, right? Like this is apps, right? So if you're doing an Android app, like, I probably want it on the Kindle Fire too, because a lot of people buy those because they're cheap tablets for their kids, and then you've got purchases there too. Then makes more money. I've sold very few copies of anything on that store, so it's probably not even worth setting up.
Yeah, who knows if it's even still there or functional.
Yeah, I know my app is there, and I feel bad because I'm like, oh yeah, if there's anyone actually using it, it hasn't been updated forever there. Same with Windows though. So I delisted my Windows one finally. It's not there anymore. Yeah,
there you go. So you got to get web.
So I think thanks everyone for letting me vent about in-app purchases.
Do you feel better? You never quite recover from these things though. You're always just a little bit lesser soul, a little bit lesser of a soul at the end of them, aren't you?
A little bit, yeah. Takes a few years off your life. I've got more like gray hairs coming in the beard hair these days.
It's not that bad.
No,
mine's bad. I'm starting to look like a ghost.
Yeah. So,
although John says I have a bad camera, can I blame it on the camera? I can.
Sure.
Now.
Let's go with that.
You'll be like, it's time to get a new camera.
That's right. Yeah. So I think if I'd really be curious to know if anyone else has as much trauma from dealing with in-app purchases as I do. Send us a note. Maybe we can do the version 2, or we're planning a multi-topic episode at some point, which might fit in good.
I think we're going to go to the micro topic soon. We're going to talk more about little things, as opposed to full learning episodes. We'll see.
That's right.
John. All right. John and I may get our own rant corners. I don't know. John doesn't like it because my rants get gears.
One of those sections.
You know what really grinds my gears?
That's right.
Yeah, just let me have it. Let me have my moment.
Done. Okay. All right. Well, as always, don't forget to go hit that button that does the thing like the subscribing or reviewing of 5 stars. All the trendy new things that we're gonna learn one day.
Slay it, as my daughter says.
Yes. Slay it. Yeah. Don't
That's
be
a good put
Ohio.
Term.
Apparently, I'm learning all these things from kids.
Slay it.
Yeah. GoneMobile.io. That's where you can go slay it and smash that like button. Subscribe. YouTube. That'll do it. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks, man.
Thanks, everybody.